Hello everyone, if this is your first talk with us today, then welcome to the Sales Enablement Festival. And for those of you who've already been tuning in to our selection of talks, welcome back. We have so much more amazing content heading your way, but before we get back into it, we just want to take this moment to thank all our amazing sponsors and partners for bringing this virtual festival to life. We also want to thank you, our attendees, for joining us today. If you're enjoying the content from the festival, be sure to check out the SEC membership plans. It's here where you can gain access to exclusive content, research and frameworks, and discounts to things like our brand new workshop series and so much more. You can find more information about this over on the Sales Enablement Collective website. Don't forget to have your questions ready for the live Q&A at the end of this talk, as you'll have the chance to put them to the experts themselves. That's everything from me, so all that's left to do is sit back and enjoy this next talk.
Hey everyone, my name is Joe Cardenas, and I'm the Global Program Manager that leads the mission of onboarding for our Rackers with the sales and customer success organizations. I want to welcome you to our session together called the Connective Tissue of Onboarding. Now, as we're all aware, we're living in the time of the Great Resignation. Every month from April to August of 2021, at least 2.5% of the American workforce quit their jobs. And in August alone, more than 4.2 million people handed in their 2 weeks notice, according to federal statistics. Now, this is a problem that's causing a negative impact for employers as they're faced with unprecedented levels of attrition, and it's very expensive for employers to keep up with the amount of people who are leaving. Today, I'd like to give you some context around the framework of our program, as well as spend some time sharing some of the key factors to success that I would contribute to the impact of the program as folks are considering joining our organization as part of this movement. Now, our mission in the practice of onboarding is ramping up our new hires to their time to productivity. And it starts with the way we set the stage for their experience as they transition from outside world into the Racker family. Now, we must be that connective tissue between telling the story of Rackspace, introducing them to the key players that will help them excel in their roles, and ultimately aligning to the execution of our strategic objectives for the business. And we'll have time at the end of our session to answer any questions that you may have, and look forward to sharing any insights that you feel would be valuable. Now, before we dive into the variables of success, I'd like to take a few steps back and give you a quick introduction of who I am, as well as where my background was before entering the exciting world of enablement. It's important that I share with you my personal journeys for my why, because without knowing what our core purpose in life is, what are we really doing? So this is a picture of my beautiful family, and I'm a little biased, where I have my wife that I've been married to for 20 years and our 3 children. Now, I'm a domesticated man, and most of my free time outside of the daily grind is spent with hanging out with my family. My weekends consist of barbecue and the occasional birthday party and the controversial game night where all bets are off the table. I can tell you that the time with my loved ones refills my spirit when I'm ready to get the week started on that fine Monday morning. Now, from a professional standpoint, I've spent most of my career in direct sales in both mid-market and Fortune 500 organizations. When I graduated high school, I was able to dip my toe in the world of sales by learning call scripts and navigating conversations through my time with West Telemarketing. This was complemented with my time working in an indirect role with Sprint, as my responsibilities included influencing and training, third-party employees to promote our services. And when transitioning over to AT&T, I learned how to hunt for new logos in their commercial space and eventually became an overlay for the Central South Texas sales teams, selling fiber, GPS tracking assets, and workforce applications. Now from there, I joined Rackspace, and I joined the organization as an install-based seller in the mid-market space. Although I had been in sales, this was my first time selling hosting, cybersecurity, and other areas of their vast portfolio. I quickly learned that my path to success was to stick to my fundamentals of what took me through my career to date: networking, leaning on the expertise of my support cast, and knowing how to navigate the ecosystem to get the job done. And with that mentality, it allowed me to take that bold step into the world of enablement. And I've appreciated my growth in this space since taking the step just over 3 years ago. Now, in 2020, our team was tasked to roll out a tiered learning program that had the learning tracks to reinforce the desired competencies that our executive leadership team wanted to see present across all our customer-facing roles. We launched our program with a racing theme, and we called it Race to Win. Each track had a different type of car that would represent each tier in our progressive model, where learners would start at the foundational level in Racer, followed by Sprinter and Indy, and eventually graduate within the mastery level of F1. And as we built this program, we were also faced with the expansion of our efforts from being focused on the Americas region to rolling out on a global scale. And little did we know that the COVID pandemic was going to be making its entrance into the world at the same time of our intended launch. But our planning efforts paid dividends as it allowed our launch to go off with the scalability to have a uniform experience, whether you're an enterprise seller in Sydney, a solutions engineer in London, or a customer success manager in Los Angeles. Our results? Well, I'm proud to say that over 950 Rackers went through Racer with a 99.9% global graduation rate. And after launch, the Racer team essentially became our global onboarding program that exists today. Now, our alignment to our leadership team was crucial to launch at the scales that were intended. It resulted in a successful launch that couldn't have been done without the 75 plus Rackers that were our subject matter experts that helped us build out over 150 distinct modules. I'm also proud to say that we won the Bronze Stevie Award for Sales Enablement Program of the Year for Racer in 2020. And it was quite the honor to receive the award, considering the amount of effort that it took to launch this initiative. And let's just say, we're not going to be happy until we achieve the gold. I guess that's the competitor in me that has to say that out loud. Now, as I reflect on my time leading our onboarding initiatives, I would place the key factors to our success today in 5 buckets. And as with any program, it starts with your focus on how you build and reinforce the framework. Now, this is crucial, especially at the scale that we were faced with, to ensure there was consistency across all regions. And in this new virtual world, we had to consider ways to enhance the relationships in our community, as we had to create the optimal experience to make our learners feel that our connectivity through the world of Zoom and Teams, because that was really the only way that we can connect. And it would be an environment where collaboration would by considering we had learners that couldn't simply turn to their neighbor to ask a question. We were also consistently evaluating ways to evolve the experience for our program as we continue to challenge ourselves to keep the learners engaged. And lastly, we need to celebrate our Rackers' success. Joining a new organization is tough enough, and we look for alternate ways to celebrate our success on an individual and on a cohort level. For enablement programs to reach their full potential, a lot of moving parts must be working in tandem. One of the most essential pieces to ensuring enablement success is a partnership with the leadership team. Enablement must have a thorough understanding of the leader's goals to effectively maximize the program's success. And our executive leadership team had provided a list of desired competencies that were necessary for any Racker to demonstrate. And this became our mission to help determine the framework of the design of our learners. These competencies were addressed, and we brought them into different areas that included business acumen, systems and tools, people and process, sales motion, and of course, understanding our portfolio. Now, as our progression continued in the development stages, we would also spend time educating middle management and frontline leaders on where we were taking this experience to ensure that the mission was clear, as well as gather any additional feedback to take into consideration prior to rollout. And it's key to continue to reinforce this approach as new leaders join the organization. That way, it continues your momentum that was created with the initial design. Now, the beauty behind the design of our program today is that the experience is 85% learner driven. We leverage our LMS capabilities and have pre-built modules and courses for our learners to take on within one of 4 paths that include sales, customer success, technical sales, and leadership tracks. This means that everyone has the autonomy, to an extent, to schedule their learning in time in each business day to complement the approach of getting acclimated to the business. Our recommendation is for them to block off several hours per day to allow them to learn from our modules, demonstrate demonstrate comprehension through completing assessments, and revisit as necessary to provide reinforcement for areas that they need more attention based upon where they're at in their professional journey when they join our organization. Now, accountability is key. And this learning journey is not only owned by the individual contributor that recently joined our organization, but their leaders as well. And part of our process is to send out friendly reminders to leaders on the time commitment that we reinforce with our learners so that they can help provide air coverage for these rackers as they understand more about their role and their responsibility to the business. Now, in addition, we send out weekly participation reports every Thursday to the racker and their leader so that there is full transparency of the status of completion of required modules, courses, and missions, as each week is rounded out with the goal of 100% completion of the specific track that they're consuming. Now, this method can also promote the conversation with the leader and their new racker to understand how their experience is going in our program, as well as provide guidance of where to continue to focus as they round out their time with our team. Humans evolve from tribes, and meaningful human contact remains at the core of our emotional and psychological well-being. However, as remote living and working accelerates, more and more people will find themselves isolated, and this is the last thing that you want for a new hire within your organization to feel. There was a lot of thought and consideration that was done as they were speaking to recruiters and interview panels to get their foot in the door in your organization. And it's our role to make them feel like they made the right decision. So naturally, the question is, how do we do that? Well, you can start by having daily check-ins with your cohort. In the design of our 3-week program, we combine all our rookies together to go through a general onboarding track to understand the fundamentals of Rackspace. The learners hear key messaging from our leadership. They understand our portfolio at a high level and get introduced to some of our customer-facing assets that'll be leveraged as they speak with clients. It's always interesting to understand the wide spectrum of experience in our orientations, as our audience can be an intern that was recently brought into a lead generation role, or it could be a senior director over our customer success teams. With this mixed audience, you can't miss the opportunity to start off every day with promoting collaboration amongst the teams, as it fuels every conversation with different vantage points that will accelerate learning for all. And these conversations are the ones that may have not happened in the past, as these roles haven't traditionally been trained or been part of the same onboarding experience in the past. Now, the title and the opening to my slide on the first day of orientation is One Team, One Voice. And the goal of any organization is to promote that cross collaboration across teams, because our clients think of us as the brand of the organization that we're working for. We are Rackspace. Your learners will be, insert your company name. If this isn't the feeling when someone joins your onboarding program, there's a key opportunity that's being left on the table. And as I had mentioned, we combine all learners together in the first week, but then they split up into different check-ins for weeks 2 and weeks 3. This approach allows us to go from a very generalized approach to connecting with their counterparts across the globe in their respective roles to build community. And they are learning together. And as tactical needs or challenges come up in their ramp up process, the probability of them engaging one of their peers from the cohort is very high. It's networking 101 if you really think about it. We're just providing the platform for these connections to take place. Now, orientation is my favorite day because I get to engage with our rookies to understand their level of tenure in the technology space, find out what brought them to Rackspace, and even get to see what their favorite hobby is. Notice I didn't start with my own agenda. We're in the people business, and it's important to understand their why, much like I started my why with you, because it helps fuel future interactions. We're creating the best virtual experience we can from the very first call, and I share expectations with everyone after we've taken turns given our introductions so we know who we're building relationships with over the next 3 months. And theoretical learning can paint the picture of what to expect when leveraging tools or being told how to present our organization's value proposition, but the magic is in application. So in our example, on our sales track in onboarding, our learners have the opportunity to leverage case studies in weeks 2 and weeks 3. Each week starts off with the customer engagement that initiates the sales process, and they're asked to demonstrate how they would communicate with the client in setting up the initial discussion, how the entry would be built into Salesforce, conduct the discovery conversation, and other sales motions that would be required to take a client through the entire process, all the way through pulling contract for signature. And this approach helps me see where the skill set is for the learners on an individual basis as they submit their missions. And I can provide direct feedback that may inevitably lead to a larger coaching conversation based upon the situation. Now, as I shared in the beginning of this presentation, I was an actual seller on the floor at Rackspace for 3 years. And I have the experience of navigating our system for generating quotes, sharing best practices of hygiene in Salesforce, as well as engaging the proper resources as complex obstacles arrive. Now, we have best practices and videos that are built within our platform, but there is a lot of value in live demonstrations that involve our guest speakers as issues arise. It also sparks other conversations that may not be presently in our modules since the business moves at the speed that it does. And there's some times, as an example, where I'll engage some of our tenured solution engineers so we can have some real fun to see how our sellers can partner up, have that technical discussion, do a build out with one another, and get challenged on the how and the why for the design of quoting our solutions. Feedback is a gift. Our team is never satisfied with the status quo, and we must be fluid enough to move with the business to keep up with the changes in the portfolio or the latest shift in an engagement process or tool. And as part of our engagement with our rackers, we have entry polls that give us insight on how their experience has been prior to coming to onboarding. Our newest rackers are hired at various times all throughout the month, and it's important for us to understand what the experience has been as we have them join us to accelerate their journey. We also have polls that are infused in every module. Our team evaluates the level of impact based upon the summary of scores that are related to each module, to where we prioritize which modules to revisit based upon our review. So think of it as our own NPS. So we can share and understand and listen to our learners to look on how to improve the experience. And at the end of the 3 weeks, we go beyond feedback at not only at the module level, but we make it a broader approach, the program level. We ask questions like, what was your biggest takeaway from your experience? that you feel will make immediate impact as you transition into your roles full time. Another one could be, what were your biggest challenges while spending your time with us in onboarding? Or last but not least, if you had a magic wand, what would you change about your experience? Every learner completes these, and as we wrap up our time together for their graduation day, I walk them through the top themes that were captured in the experience so we can talk through them as a group to make them feel that their voice was heard, which it should be. And sometimes we have short-term success that can be simple shifts in the arrangement of content, and others, it could be more complex, which takes a few more cycles, but at least we're aware of those themes so we can understand really, really shift our priorities. Now, as we wrap up, it's not a goodbye, it's a see you later. We immediately put a follow-up call with them 90 days from the day they graduate. And why? Because there's always a chance that we could still shift our priorities on what we do in onboarding and how we train to ensure we have the amount of traction that we intend for our learners to leave with. Last and certainly not least, we must celebrate their success. It's tough to juggle the demands of the business as our learners are still wrapping their minds around how to execute their performance. And one of my colleagues and I were playing with Zoom filters one day and decided to put on a graduation cap as we awaited for our cohort to join our bridge earlier this year. I started to challenge the rackers in our cohort to pop on their cap filters so we could take a quick picture to commemorate our time together. And we shared this picture in our next executive level update, and they loved it. This has actually become a routine in our graduations, and I engaged one of my favorite rackers in marketing to see how we could partner up to announce to the world who our newest additions to the racker family were. In a very short period of time, this went from concept to reality as we shared the idea with our teams along with our HR partners to help aid them in their recruiting efforts in attracting global talent. It's a win-win. And it became a win for Rackspace and a bigger win for our new rackers as they were ready to take on their new roles with a level of confidence that would entice anyone in their level of engagement. And as we wrap up the presentation, I would love for this to be the biggest takeaway. Our passion, our drive, and our program is all about our people. And as long as we keep that top of mind, our will to evolve will never change. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Hey Joe, are you there? Hey, that
I'm
was
here.
great. That was a great presentation, Joe. Thanks so much. And
Thank you.
looking at the chat, it looks like there's people from all over the world here, and we do have a few questions. So the first is from Patricia, who asks, did you give special training to managers or leaders to help them on the program?
That could be answered two different ways. So in the initial rollout, just the structure and framework, we definitely worked with all of our leadership teams to make sure we received the buy-in, kind of the validating the direction we were going prior to launch. And I guess the other way I can answer that question is preparing them for their own tracks, and really working with the leadership team to help understand that we had the right content as we were preparing for receiving newer leaders. That was definitely a bigger conversation, speaking to our executive leadership team, speaking to HR, speaking to a number of cross-functional team members to ensure that we are capturing all that we needed to as they were in the business, because they were learning a new ecosystem. But of course, with all the different tools and processes that every organization had, we had to make sure that we set the right mark. So hopefully I answered that question for you, Patricia. If not, I'll be more than elaborate towards the tail end if you like.
That's great. We have one from Isabella here who asks, how do you define a successful onboarding program and how are you measuring this?
So there's a couple different ways of how we measure it. I talked a lot around the feedback factor, right? I spent some time around just the modules, around the experience. So we find a lot of that because it allows us to become very tactical in our approach. and that way we can make the impact as necessary. From a metrics perspective, I'm sure that's the $1 million question that everybody wants to ask, is really around the reporting that we provide to our executive leadership team really has to be focused on what's their time to first sale, right? Leveraging to find out when that productivity takes place. We also look at other factors like how is the pipeline look at after 3 months on board, after 6 months on board? Are we making that type of impact within that? And also just I already talked about average days to first sale. So those are our three primary buckets so we can understand how quickly that traction's taking. Because again, our main remit is acceleration of their journey, right? So that will allow us to see the results, especially considering that we only have them for 3 weeks, and then we set them free to see how they've made that impact in the business.
Great. So Karina wants to know what the ratio of e-learning and self-paced versus live/in-person sessions are.
Great question. So the way that it exists today, everything, I would say 95% is e-learning. We built a lot of the modules because part of what I had mentioned at the beginning of the conversation was our small but mighty team. We're now made up of 5 rackers, and our remit is global education. So in order for us to become scalable and being able to have that uniform experience that we're trying to create, the modules allow us to do that. But where we actually get to inject and have that one-on-one conversations and bring in live speakers, we hold check-ins every single day of their experience. Again, going back to the title of the connective tissue, that way we can have those discussions. And then we also bring in guest speakers of the business to where one day you want to talk about Net Promoter Score. Then let's have the director of Net Promoter Score come in, introduce themselves, and complement what's inside the modules. So we're continuing to evaluate different areas because factors like digital fatigue do play a factor into the experience. So we're continuing to look at different ways where we can evolve that approach and bring more live and instructor-led conversations into the equation to really give that balance that we're trying to shoot for.
That's great. And Mike asks a fun one here. He says, other than the fun Zoom filter, what is something you implemented in your onboarding program that you'd never seen done before?
Ooh, Mike with the $1 million question. Fun Zoom filter. Other than that, man, that's a good one.
Doing
Yeah,
everything really well, the things you already seen. Is that
I think the biggest thing is actually I can go back to just if you think about Teams, think about whatever internal message that you're using. You know, when we launch the cohorts, we make sure that every cohort is named, again, racing theme, right? Every single Teams channel has their own racing theme. So when they're first brought on board, that's already a welcome way of opening up the discussion. More times than not, you're hearing good morning from Dubai, hello from the UK, like from all the, because again, we've got a global team. So it allows us to consistently have that interaction. We're not just waiting for check-in calls. We're just not waiting for scheduled pieces to come aboard. It allows everyone to be so fluid. And then before you know it, we're inundated with themes of memes and jokes and again, creating that community that we're really trying to establish. And it also allows me to be very fluid to where if we're having challenges around a specific exercise, or I'm seeing some other parts where I see a really good presentation that sets the stage, then I can, of course, I will ask that racker if they're okay with me sharing that experience, but I'll turn around and broadcast to others that are still waiting to record their presentation. So what better way for them to see best practices than other peers within the cohort with them? And then that way they can use that towards rounding out their activities and their missions that we've set aside for them to accomplish.
okay? So I think we can squeeze one more in, and there's
Sure.
Sam asking how many/how often do you have new cohorts?
Every month, my friend. So every month we have a new cohort coming in. Again, the length of our program is 3 weeks that we have in. Of course, everyone gets hired on at different times. So again, part of our process, we send them a welcome email the day they start. We actually give them early access to some of our platforms so they can start to ingest some of the enablement that's already out there. And that way, by the time that they step foot in our doors for day one, they're not starting from scratch. They've actually had a chance to listen into some of our recorded enablement talks, even go down certification paths to where we can really jumpstart their learning and get them prepared for our boot camp that we have prepared for them.
That's perfect. And I think we're just about coming up to time. So I think that's all we have time for, unfortunately. But thank you so much, Joe. That was a great presentation. And I mean, I think we had a great response in the chat as well. People from all over the world, and hopefully people can take away some great advice from that, because I certainly learned a lot.
Beautiful. It was my pleasure. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the conference.